This is Clair Obscur Expedition 33, running at a mixture of medium and high settings at 1440p using DLSS quality on an RTX 3060 12GB and a Ryzen 5 5600X based system. This is a mid-range system from years ago, and it's honestly looking beautiful. I think this game looks absolutely gorgeous in the first couple of hours that I've been able to play. And again, if you see jutters on camera pan and things like that, remember that I'm not filming this at 60 FPS. The video is 60 FPS, but the gameplay isn't. I'm not locking VSync. So jutter and things like that can come from capturing issues being out of sync. Watch the frame time graph to measure smoothness. But in general, I think this looks absolutely stunning. And again, at pretty reasonable graphic settings. I'll go ahead and show you here. So here we're at custom settings. Again, it's DLSS quality on a 1440p output. And then we have, I do have all the post-processing turned on. You could turn it off if you prefer no motion blur and all of that. And again, it's mostly medium settings with textures, foliage, and shading set to high. This is working pretty well so far. And like I said, performance seems kind of mid 50 FPS range in everything I've done so far in the first little over an hour of gameplay. It's feeling pretty good. On a variable refresh rate display, if you were on a 60 Hz monitor that was not variable refresh rate, you could maybe set up a custom 60 Hz or something, or you could go a little more aggressive on DLSS perhaps. For example, if I went down to DLSS balanced mode, we could more frequently stay above that 60 FPS mark, which we'll see here in a second. We'll test out some other GPUs, other systems. We'll look at a 5090. Maybe I'll throw in my AMD 9070 XT, see how that does. But in general, I think this kind of older mid-range system is indicative of what a lot of people actually have. And again, the game can look pretty great at these settings. Again, DLSS balanced will do a better job of locking to 60. If you needed to. I was playing on RTX 4060 based system on my lunch break at work on an ultra-wide 1440p display, and I went with DLSS balanced at medium settings and could mostly lock to 60 with some dips. Now, I'm going to go back to the DLSS quality because I feel like that was more my preference image quality-wise. And like I said, I think things are looking pretty great here. If I had to nitpick anything on the visuals, and this is nitpicking, I think things are great. It's that I don't think the facial animations and lip syncing are particularly great, but I do think the voice acting and writing is very good. So with that in mind, I can kind of excuse this. Honestly, out of any of the games I've started recently, the first hour of the actual storyline in this game has drawn me in far more than just about anything else. Now, what I'm going to show you here is that the combat system in this game is turn-based. So even if your frame rate isn't perfect or anything like that, you could get by with some lower frame rates and still have, I think, decent gameplay. However, do note that there are quick time events on the turn-based battles. I think this is kind of nice. It also has a dodge and parry system when you're on defense, so I think that you can get some of that action gameplay-y sort of feel while still being within a turn-based system. Overall, I'm not super far into the game, so I can't comment on the full depth of the combat system, but I do think it's overall enjoyable, at least for me. I'm into it. I know this style of game isn't going to be for absolutely everybody. But man, just the first hour, the emotions and this setup, this world that it's living in, I don't want to spoil anything. I went into this completely blind, didn't really know what to expect other than, hey, new RPG coming out today. I'll test it out for the channel. I'm telling you right now, so far, I'm into it. This is definitely the next game I actually play to completion. Now, before we go ahead, and by the way, you can switch characters like this. Anyway, before we go ahead and go onto other hardware, though, let's load some other saves that are at different points in the game. I think if I go to playtime around 51 minutes, we'll get a nighttime scene, so you can see a kind of a different lighting setup at these settings. Performance profile is a little bit different, but again, still kind of in the mid-50s to see that this is fairly representative of what we're seeing here. So again, kind of in the mid-50s or so. can top out around 60-ish at times in this kind of night area. And then again, I could load another save that is a bit further along here. Once you're kind of out of the town, that's sort of your intro, you go off on a journey, and here's where you end up. Again, completely different graphical design to this area, and I once again would class it as gorgeous. I really think the game is quite good looking. And like I said, mix of medium and high settings on the RTX 3060 seems to be doing pretty well. And again, that's 1440p output using DLSS quality to help out performance. We could, of course, drop down to a 1080p output. So why don't we do that? Because I think some people with an RTX 3060 are pairing it at a 1440p display, but not everybody. You might still be on a 1080p display for sure. So if we go ahead and maybe go back to, you know what, let's try out DLAA. That's going to be more demanding than just a lighter weight anti-aliasing technique. But DLAA is a native 1080p resolution. So here we're looking at native 1080p, again at that mix of medium and high settings, using DLAA for high quality anti-aliasing. And again, similar looking performance here. We're actually kind of over the 60 FPS line here a bit. And let's try out a few of those other scenes just to get that idea before we, like I said, switch to some other hardware. So how about we jump in to the nighttime scene right here. As far as other hardware goes, by the way, I don't think I'm going to show any Steam Deck gameplay in this video just because I don't want to set up the capture for it, but I did try it for about 20 minutes on my Steam Deck, and I will say that the game's frame rate is okay, but the settings it forces you into look horrendous. So if you did want to play it on a Steam Deck, oh man, I mean, I imagine the gameplay would hold up, like combat and everything like that, but it's a really pretty looking game, but not on the Steam Deck. That's all I'll say. It's not one I'm going to play on the Steam Deck unless I'm streaming with Moonlight from my PC. You know, you could give it a shot if you've got a Steam Deck. You'll be able to see right at the start what it looks like. It seemed to me like it was locking me out of the actual graphic settings. I could adjust the upscaling, but not the actual graphic settings on my Steam Deck unless my menu was just bugged. There are some games like that. And really, it just had the settings lower than I would like. It seemed to be targeting like 45 FPS. I would have rather targeted 30 at higher graphic settings, and I could, you know, anyway, that's that. So here's here again, 1080p on the RTX 3060 in this scene. Again, think it looks pretty gorgeous. We're kind of in the mid 50 FPS range. So you can see here that 1080p with DLAA has similar performance to 1440p with DLSS quality. Again, you could use a lighter upscaler or something like that if you wanted a bit more performance. So let's go ahead and switch hardware. How about we now jump to the RTX 5090 and just see how strong that system is. And I actually haven't tried it on the 5090 yet. Now, this PC has not ran this game yet at all. And I did notice as soon as I started this up and panned the camera, that there was a few stutters, meaning that there is some shader compilation happening. I'm curious if like talking to a character will trigger it. Yeah, you see a stutter on the frame time graph right there. And that is one thing I'll say my first time through here, is that being an Unreal Engine game, I'm always on my lookout for stutters. And there is a bit of shader compilation stutter happening here. So even on this RTX 5090 9800X3D based system, it is not going to be a flawlessly stutter-free experience. When you see new characters for the first time, things like that, there can be a little frame time blip, which is a bit frustrating. But, you know, at this point with Unreal Engine, I'm just like, I don't even know what to say other than it's kind of to be expected with Unreal Engine, but that doesn't mean it should be excused. I will say it hasn't been as bad as some other games I've looked at, but there have been some shader compilation stutters. Let's go ahead and check out the night scene real quick, again on the RTX 5090. And to be clear, the graphic settings right now are just absolutely maxed out. So this is the game, at least it should be, maxed out at 4K. Let's double check, because in my Oblivion testing, things seemed a bit odd. So we are at 4K resolution. The DLSS is set to DLAA, which is full rendering resolution, 100%. Resolution scale is at 100%. We have everything cranked to the right, so everything is on Epic. So this should be native 4K on the 5090. That being said, I'm curious if we kicked on to quality level DLSS, see if we can get a higher frame rate experience on that. So looks like here that will get performance up into the upper 80s, mid 90s, that kind of situation in this scene. So this is, again, DLSS quality on the 5090 at absolutely maxed out settings. And again, the occasional little stutter happening as shader compilation takes place. And then let's go ahead to the further along gameplay in the actual kind of game world, I would say, rather than the intro city area, and see what that looks like. So again, this is still with the DLSS quality enabled, but everything else maxed out at 4K, and there you go. So performance at 1440p native will be similar to what I'm getting with DLSS quality at the 4K output, so I'm not sure we really need to go into too much on all of that. So there you go. The last thing I'd like to test out here is an AMD GPU, so how about we try out the 9070 XT. All right, we are now on the 9070 XT at completely maxed out 1440p. And let's go ahead and look at something. So the first thing I noticed, I was checking if there was FSR4, but not only could I not find FSR4, I don't see any FSR at all. Now, to be honest, if there's not FSR4, then TSR and XeSS, sometimes I would choose over FSR3 and older anyway. So I'm actually not too bothered by TSR being the option here. So right now I'm at TSR Epic, which is 100% resolution scale. So a kind of costly anti-aliasing setting there at a native resolution. And again, it is at absolutely epic settings on everything. So that's where we're at right here. It looks like we're right at about 60 FPS, slightly below. Let's go ahead and run around a bit. Again, if you see some frame time blips, it's likely shader compilation, given that this game that I did just start, this GPU has not played this game yet, so I would not expect all these shaders to be locked in at this point. There's a few little stutters right there. Anyway, so performance-wise, 60 FPS in a game like this is probably fine. However, we could, of course, seek some better performance. Now, obviously, playing at settings below Epic would make a lot of sense. Another choice is to keep everything else to max, but adjust the scaling, again, either using TSR or XeSS. If we pull it down to the high settings for scaling, that brings the resolution scale down to 85%. So it's no longer a native 1440p resolution, but it's using the TSR upscaling to try to look as close to native as possible. Now, at 85%, that is not far below native, and I do think TSR does a pretty good job. Like I said, honestly, a lot of times better than things like FSR3. I noticed that now performance is more well above that 60 FPS mark more comfortably. So I think for a lot of people, this would maybe be the only compromise you would need to make, although obviously turning down a lot more settings could make an improvement there. I am noticing some temporal aliasing in the distance there. You can kind of see some flicker on some objects. I'm curious if XeSS would have a better result here. So let's go to XeSS. If we use ultra quality, that's a 77% resolution scale. I'm curious how that does. So this is actually a lower resolution scale than we were using on the TSR there. Looks maybe a bit more temporally stable on kind of that little flickering I saw in the distance. There's trade-offs between XeSS and TSR here. Is it just me, or do the flower petals maybe have a little more ghosting trails? Hard to say. Anyway, so this is a little more aggressive resolution scale, and this is using XeSS. And we're kind of in the, looks like mid-70s now. So more performance than we had with TSR, but that's mostly, I think, because the resolution scale is a bit lower. And again, we could go we could go more aggressive than this. So like if we went down to ultra quality, which is the same resolution scale that DLSS and FSR would call quality. So it's the the 67% resolution scale. So we can see here now with XeSS at these settings, performance is up in the 80s or so. So this is certainly a way you could go on that. I'm curious if we were at a similar resolution scale but using TSR, how things would compare. So again, it looks like we're at about 85 here. Let's go ahead and switch over to TSR. And let's see, so can I just manually, it doesn't look like it'll let me just manually adjust the resolution scale to exactly what I want, unless I'm missing something here. So this is 75%. So still not quite as low as we were getting on the XeSS result. Performance is kind of upper 70s now, mid 70s as we run around. So anyway, I would suggest again on an AMD GPU, play with XeSS and TSR and decide which one you prefer. And kind of look at what performance you're getting at various resolution scales, because they don't have an identical upscaling cost. But let's say we stick around on this one. Again, there does seem to be more flicker if you see that object right by her head to the right of her head. Definitely noticing a little more flicker on that. But let's load a couple of other saves at these settings and kind of see what that looks like. So let's jump to the nighttime scene. Again, max settings other than resolution scaling. And yeah, definitely seeing some flickering on that kind of, I don't know what that is, the building to the right of his head right there. So seeing a bit of flickering with the upscaling path on that. Not the end of the world. Most of the objects I'm looking at here seem fine. So there's that. Looks like we're kind of in the mid 70s or so there. And again, we could take a look at that other save I had a little bit further into the game and compare here. Yeah, so here I'm definitely seeing some issues with the flickering in the foliage right in front there. So not absolutely loving that. Let's go ahead and try out, what if we switched back to XeSS, see if it had a better result on this one. Again, we'll go back to maybe the, well, Ultra Quality Plus is a similar resolution internally to what we were just looking at with the TSR. Again, I feel like maybe there's a little more ghosting trails on the, petals in the wind, but, well, there's still some temporal flickering on the foliage. I think it does seem a bit cleaned up. So I might be preferring the XeSS image here. It's a little hard to say. There's different levels of disocclusion as the character runs as well. But before we're done here, how about we switch over to 4K resolution? So let's go to 4K. Again, this is currently max settings other than the resolution scaling. So this is XeSS Ultra Quality, so 77% internal rendering resolution on a 4K output. So pretty demanding stuff. Looks like we're around 50-ish FPS, definitely dipping into the mid-40s in motion. Looks like we'd probably want to push things a bit further. Now, given that we're at the 4K output now, I think that going a bit more aggressive on the resolution scaling might make sense. Let's maybe drop to the ultra quality on the XeSS, see where that gets us. And again, ultra quality on XeSS is the same internal rendering resolution as DLSS quality or FSR quality. It's just a difference in the naming scheme with the XeSS branding. So that does seem to hit 4K 60-ish with, it looks like, a few little dips here and there. So honestly, this would definitely be a way you could go. Obviously, you can turn down settings below Epic, but let's see for now, how about we just try out these settings in a couple other areas. So let's pop back into the kind of daylight scene in the town and see how we fare with this. So looks like this is a bit more demanding than where we just were previously. So looking like now are closer to 50 FPS than to 60. Again, tons of NPCs on screen, lots of geometry and stuff. So I imagine this is a fairly heavy scene as the game goes. I haven't played through the whole game yet though, so I can't say how it stacks up. So again, here we could turn down more aggressively. Another option, of course, would be to reduce graphics settings. So what if I just swap the whole graphics preset down to high? Let's apply that, but leaving XeSS on the ultra quality setting. And so again, all the graphics settings down to high. I think we'll get noticeably better performance here. So on high instead of Epic, looks like we're kind of in the mid 60 FPS range now, again, with the resolution scaling helping us out quite a bit here. Let's pop into the nighttime scene before we go and see how that looks. So nighttime scene was this save, I think. And then we'll wrap up this video, so I can just, like I said, I just want to play this game. I want to see what happens. The story's really good. Anyway, at least to my tastes. Obviously, everybody will have... I can do objective performance measurements. Obviously, gameplay and storyline reviews are subjective, but certainly to my taste. All right, yeah, it seems like we're in the mid-60s here. So 9070 XT seems to give us good results at 1440p and 4K. Turning down to high settings rather than Epic does seem to get quite a bit of performance back. And like I said, on cards more like the RTX 3060, it seemed like that mixture of medium and high settings was definitely a good way to go. Also, not a massive amount of VRAM usage. Unreal Engine 5 tends to be fairly conservative on VRAM usage. But again, the usual suspects if you're having trouble with an 8GB of VRAM card is usually adjust things like textures first. That tends to be one of the higher ones on VRAM usage. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Like I said, if you're interested in RPGs with what seems, at least in the initial couple hours, to be a very compelling storyline and setting that seems fairly original, I don't want to spoil anything with any details, but seems pretty original in that regard. Turn-based combat, but with some real-time elements, so you're on your toes with the parries and quick-time timings and things like that. Seems pretty compelling from what I've played so far. Obviously, this isn't a full game review since I haven't played the full game. I hope all of you have an excellent day.